It's my honor to introduce to you the next panel, if everybody will bring it down a little bit, which includes three very inspirational women. Moderating will be PBS's newly minted co-anchor, Judy Woodruff, who has blazed a trail for women in broadcast journalism and is always available to lend a helping hand to other women, as she is doing today. She will be talking to Tory Burch, one of our partners today, which we're very excited about, the CEO, fashion designer, and philanthropist. You all know Tory Burch's designs, and you've all worn them, but what you might not know is that Tory is using her platform to develop the Tory Burch Foundation, which basically is helping women build sustainable businesses through mentoring, through helping with financing, and she has a wonderful story to tell. And also joining them is Melanne Verveer, who is now with the Georgetown Center of Women, Peace, and Security. She was the first Women's Global Ambassador at the State Department. And as many of you in this room know who know Melanne, she has always been willing to help other women and has helped a lot of us. So please welcome them.
Thank you, Lois. All three of us are delighted to be here. It sounds like we know you've already had a terrific conversation in the first panel. It's gotten everybody thinking and stewing about what women can do, how much difference women can make. And these two women we are so fortunate to be able to hear from the two of them, given their backgrounds, given what they have done. So I just am privileged to be here to be able to talk to you, Tory and Melanne. So let's get right to it. I want to ask each of you from your own perspective, and Tory, I'll start with you. Why is it important? Why does it matter whether women get involved as entrepreneurs, whether women, even setting the word entrepreneur aside, why does it matter that women are engaged in the economy?
It's funny. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. But when I was growing up, I had three brothers, and I never knew that women face challenges because I was raised to think about my brothers and I were the same. We would always want to do and have similar dreams, and that I wouldn't have more obstacles than they would just based on my gender. And then I went to Penn, I graduated from Penn, I got into the workforce, and fast forward maybe 15 years, I tried to start my own business. And that's when I really saw the challenges kick in and saw how challenging it was for me. And I had been lucky enough to have certain things, that I had access to people and I had enough money to start a business carefully, but I saw that there were a lot of biased people out there, and it was very difficult for me to raise money in the beginning as well.
So even though you did have some resources, as you were saying, you had some support systems, it was still hard?
It was very hard, and we didn't have a lot of resources, or we had a lot of support. And that's one thing I realized is through my career, mentorship was such a big part of it. And whether it was different roles I had in business, but when I started my company, I was an information gatherer. So I went back to all the people I had worked with and got their advice and really leaned on it and then made my own decisions.
Well, I want to come back to several of the things you said, but Melanne, from your perspective, why does it matter that women are involved in the economy? We know you have been in all the important jobs in Washington, Chief of Staff to the First Lady, Assistant to the President, the person who started Vital Voices, the important role you've played at the State Department, and now you've started this whole new school at Georgetown.
Well, I think, Judy, we know, like no other time, because we are functioning from an evidence-based body, a building block, we know that women drive economic growth. They are critical to jobs creation. Now, we know that from myriad sources, we have a growing body of research and data that says that to us, and I think speaks loudly to not just the governmental sector today, but to the business community, that if you do want to create jobs and you do want to create growth, which everybody wants to see, whether in our personal lives, in terms of our own incomes, or in terms of the betterment of the larger economy on which we all depend, whether we're a business or we're trying to grow those economies, that women matter, and women matter in very significant ways. Let me just give you a very quick snapshot. For example, the World Economic Forum, which is, the bastion of global economic leaders, puts out an annual gender gap report. And it may sound like an oxymoron. Why do they put out a gender gap report? Well, they do it because as they look at countries and the gap between men and women in a country on several metrics, including economic participation, the countries where that gap is closer to being closed, guess what? They're more economically competitive and more prosperous. We know that women-owned businesses are accelerators of GDP. As one CEO said, the lowest hanging fruit to pick in some ways, because if you really do want to do this, you really have to invest in women entrepreneurs. And Karen said on the earlier panel what a difference women entrepreneurs have made in our own economy. And economists show that in the years to come, they will be responsible for about a third of the jobs in the United States. So that's not insignificant. We know women invest their money differently. They invest it and plow it back into their families, their communities. It raises the standard of living. And if you're a business today, probably one of the biggest reasons it matters is because women are the consumers. They have the purchasing power to the trillions and trillions of dollars, which will account for 3/5 of purchasing power in the next couple of years. So for so many reasons, no matter where you sit, if the economy matters, then women matter. There is just no way to escape it.
But if that's the case, Tory, then why has it been so hard, do you think, for women to get in and to be where they want to be and where they should be?
Well, one of the biggest challenges I face, and every woman faces, is when you become a mother and the work-life balance. And that's something that, when I started the company, was really part of our business plan as well, is how do we create a place where we all want to work, where it's about kindness and creativity, but really it's also about how do women be great moms and great leaders, and how do we worry about the quality of the work, not the quantity. And that's really what the kind of company we have. I think out of 2,400 employees is 80% women.
And as you've
That's amazing.
But as you've tried to build it, I mean, I want to get you to talk a little bit more about the obstacles you ran into in the early days. You said decisions were made. There is some bias.
There is a lot of bias. I guess one of the obstacles is when I went to actually raise the money. And I'm not sure if you knew this, and we don't talk about it a lot, but part of the business plan when I started the company was that we wanted to start a foundation. And when I said that to people when I went to raise money, particularly men, they said, don't ever use that business and social responsibility in the same sentence. And I thought that was so interesting because, number one, we wanted to always use it, and that was going to be part of who we were and what we wanted to stand for. And so that was one obstacle. I think also just women think differently, and I think men often, and I'm not so pro-women, pro-men, it's not really about that for me, but I think there's a different way of management skills, there's ways of looking at business. For me, I learned on the job, so I had that on top of everything else. I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the business experience or the design experience, so there were a lot of obstacles, and I think it was a bit of blind faith, and people I didn't want to talk about it, I wanted it to speak for itself.
Melanne, what are some examples of how you've seen women deal with these kinds of obstacles that Tory is describing, both from a government perspective and in the private sector?
Well, it is true that one of the reasons we haven't been able to unlock this vital force in ways that would have the kind of impact it should have and has been having, but could be so much greater, is because of these obstacles. Obstacles that you heard from on the earlier panel. Women need kinds of training, business training they can't always get. Mentors, absolutely. Networks, to be part of networks where you know where the know-how is and who can help you to the next stage. Network sounds like such a simple phrase, but it is really filled with all kinds of opportunity. Access to capital is probably the biggest problem. And creating financial tools that enable women, whether angel funds, which they rarely benefit from other kinds of venture capital, but particularly loan guarantees, the kinds of things Karen did at the SBA and our government has promoted in this country. They are critically important because women need to be able to access the capital, and it's almost like there's a conversation that it runs on parallel tracks instead of intersecting between a businesswoman and a bank administrator. They talk past each other or don't really understand each other. And I remember years ago, I was with then First Lady Hillary Clinton, and we were with a group of Hispanic entrepreneurs, and one of them said to her something I've never forgotten. They had been struggling, she and her colleagues had been struggling to set up a computer business, and she said, you know, Mrs. Clinton, the best ideas die in bank parking lots. And it is so true in so many ways. And add to this markets. Women need to grow their markets, so one of the big solutions today has been what businesses are doing to use their supply chain to buy from women entrepreneurs, from women-owned businesses.
So you're talking about it takes deliberate action ahead of time, anticipating the Is it getting better, Tory?
I think it is getting better, and it's interesting. Access to capital is certainly part of the problem, but also what we've done with Goldman Sachs, 10,000 small businesses, I think has been extraordinary to see women having access to business classes, and that's something that they haven't had the opportunity to have. So for us to be able to, with Dina's help and guidance, really offer that to women has been extraordinary for our entrepreneurs.
Is there enough of that going on? That's been a fantastic example, what Goldman Sachs is doing. Are there other organizations trying to do that in other parts of the country?
Judy, this is what's changed dramatically, and I think it's the great news story. I think it's why so many of you are here. It's why we've got this topic, and it's the recognition today. There's a paradigm shift. We're all in this together. Government has a role. Businesses have a role. You know, despite what that businessman or banker said to you about social responsibility, I think what's happening in the business community today is business looks at its brand. You know, CSR and contributions are over here, but today their investment in women's economic participation is part of the brand. And so you see major companies, in addition to Goldman Sachs, Walmart, Coca-Cola, major initiatives, ExxonMobil, whether in training, whether in sourcing from women-owned businesses, whether in providing special access to credit, actually working the situation in a way where a purchasing order. If I'm Walmart and I'm going to purchase a lot from this woman-owned business, she doesn't have collateral, she can't get the loan to actually deliver the kind of product in the magnitude that she needs to for this order, that will count for her. So there's a lot of creativity going on, and I think the good news story is that we're increasingly recognizing that we're all in this together, and business is a huge partner.
And in a minute, I want to offer you all the chance to ask some questions. But Tory, that brings up to me this notion of how do young women, or for that matter, women of any age who are interested in doing something in the business world as entrepreneurs, how do they know how to get started? I mean, is there enough information out there for them to know, here's how I get a mentor, here's how I get the training that I need? I mean,
I think that is one of the problems, is just they don't realize how much there is to help them when they get started. And that's something our foundation is really focusing on as well, and also the idea of peer-to-peer mentorship, because regardless of the business, many of the startups are experiencing many of the same problems. And so they could really help each other and form a network, and also use each other's products. And that's something that Melanne reference. But I think if we can figure out a way, and maybe that's something, maybe online mentoring, which is something that we're going to be interested in, to show them all of everything that's out there to help them, whether it's get access to loans, whether it's mentoring, whether it's education, I think that would be really helpful. I think many of the entrepreneurs I meet don't don't know what's out there.
How do you identify, how do you connect with the women you try to support through your foundation?
Well, we meet them. Terry McCullough is our executive director. We get emails daily now, many, through with Axion as one of our partners. We meet and vet many entrepreneurs. And it's sort of, how do we look at the business as viable? Is it the right business to stand behind? But we're meeting them in so many different ways. It can be a friend of a friend. It can be a mother. It's all ages, by the way.
But Melanne, there still are, I think, many women out there, I'm sure internationally, but in this country, who feel they're alone in this.
Well, they do indeed, Judy, and I think it's particularly true in the developing world, and that was one of the reasons that this issue, 21st century statecraft, if you will, became such a dominant issue over the last 4 years, to really focus on helping countries, but at the same time, in order to do that, to really help the women who had the possibilities to grow those economies. So whether it was in Africa, helping women take advantage of trade agreements, which they'd never taken advantage of, throughout South America, working with partners like IDB, and Julie was just here on the first panel, or working with other businesses who wanted to be a part of this. And I look at this wonderful audience, and I think of so many women here who have so much also to give as mentors. And as someone said earlier, it's a two-way street. I have never met a mentor who didn't feel that she wasn't the beneficiary. The mentees always tell you they learn so much and they want to pay it forward. The mentor also will tell you the same thing. And most of these programs have hinged rather significantly on the goodwill of so many professional women and women who have some skill set to provide to help others, whether it's in this country or overseas, and those are extraordinary experiences.
You mean women who've already made
women
it,
who
so
are
to speak.
in the business, or helping those who are coming up. So it's a two-way street.
How do you change the minds, Tory? I mean, you mentioned one of the conversations you had early on. How do you change the minds of people like that? What do you have to do?
People like
the gentleman you said who said,
I mean,
don't ever say. I assume it was a man who told you that. Don't ever talk about.
It was more than one, but let's start with my 3 boys. So I'm getting them early, and I think that, listen, I think it's by doing something, and you know, it's not that I ever want to be preachy or my team, but I think that we want to be examples, and we want to show them, people that have that mindset, that there's different ways of thinking, and it's actually beneficial for the economy. It's beneficial for us all to come together. And I have had the experience where I have been mentored, but I have had the experience where women have helped me a lot. And that's something that's very interesting. I think that women help other women, and that's something that is all of our experience in this room, probably.
I think one of the at least what we have found is that one of the most significant ways to persuade is by explaining how this is in the other party's self-interest. And that's where evidence has made such a big difference, because how do you argue with data, and data that is growing in significant amounts? And I could go and say, well, this is the right thing to do. She deserves a helping hand. Who knows? She may create a phenomenal business. And somebody else will say, well, that's nice, it's not so serious, not really what I should be involved in. Then show them the data about how this investment could pay off. And that changes everything, because it's no longer about her, which it is, the right thing to do. It all of a sudden is the smart strategic thing to do. And so you're shifting why this is in the interest, whether it's of the banker or the government leader, or any number of actors who are part of this chain that is so critical to the women-owned business or female entrepreneur.
And what do you say? I mean, I'm coming at it from the devil's advocate position. What do you say to those who, and particularly men, who say, well, women just don't, most women don't have the drive that men do. They're not ready to just set everything aside and focus on success. What's an answer to that?
I would say it's not even worth responding to when people say that. And really that's sort of how I look at it. I've heard a lot of comments like that. And when you look at our company and the growth that we've had in 9 years, that pretty sets that conversation up for a different.
But you've heard that, or a version of that.
I've heard it a lot.
Right.
I've heard it a lot.
And you talked about women as mothers, and that women do have to carve out different career paths and do things differently at different stages of their lives. Melanne.
And I did actually, and that was hard because when I had my third son, I was at a job at LVMH and I realized I could not keep the pace up. So I decided to take 4 years off and be a mom. And it was during those 4 years that I came up with the concept of our company. But it's very difficult. It's the challenge that we all have to figure out how to work with.
But I would say to those people who say women don't have drive, that they should look at the reality today. Because even if you look at the United States and the fact, as Karen said, women-owned businesses are outpacing male-owned businesses in terms of creation and in terms of yield. So this is the one really I always think about, because if you look at women's economic participation just in the last decade in the developed world, forget about the developing world, what women have produced in terms of helping the economies amounts to outpacing what China has contributed to the economy. Wow. We are talking about a lot of power. And imagine how much more could be unleashed, how our world could change, how our own country could benefit if this vital force were unleashed because you helped women overcome the obstacles that they confront, whether it's in the balancing or it's in the access to finance, but enabled women to unleash that potential. There's no telling what we could do for ourselves as well as for our countries and our economies.
All right, we've gotten this off to such a great start. Questions out here for these two incredibly inspiring women? I see a hand behind you.
We have
go ahead.
Kathleen Matthews, Executive Vice President of Marriott, has a question.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been great, the first panel and your panel now. I just wanted to build on Melanne's comments about the role of big business in this proposition. And how many people in the room are with a corporation or represent associations with big industries? Because I think there's a real big role for us to play. And you suggested this, Melanne, that through our supply chain, we can really do a lot. And I think what I'm finding at a company like Marriott, which has supported women-owned businesses in our supply chain for decades here in the US, we're now trying to extend that into the new markets around the world where we're opening up hotels. What we've realized is that in the past, we saw that as part of our social responsibility as a company. We saw it as the good way to do business. But now we are seeing the brand building for it. So, for example, when we open up a new hotel in Dubai, as we did earlier this year, one of the business strategies was to invite the local women's business networks into the hotel for a luncheon very much like this, and to say, we want this to be your favorite hotel in town. How are we going to do that? We want you to sell us your goods. So who here makes uniforms? Who here makes chef's hats? Who here produces lettuce? Who here produces eggs? If you have those products, we can buy them and we can start a business relationship. So for that brand, the JW Marriott brand, we saw the opportunity to meet our supply chain needs, but to also invite those women in as customers and as partners, knowing that ultimately that's one of the best strategies we could have for making that a successful hotel. So looking for those creative ways where you go from social responsibility or CSR to contributions to really embedding this as a strategy in your business becomes really, I think, the win-win. Melanne, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the commitment that's been made recently on this? Because Marriott is one of many companies joining on a commitment to try to actually procure $1.5 billion worth of goods and services from women around the world. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Kathleen, first let me salute you and Marriott, because she has done an extraordinary job in looking at her company and its purchasing power through its own supply chain, whether it's soap in the hotel rooms or, as she said, the uniforms for the people who do a lot of the work in the systems. And what this has done, it's not only made a difference for the local economy, for a hotel chain like Marriott to purchase locally, it has provided all kinds of opportunities for those women-owned businesses to grow their businesses, because all of a sudden they've got customers they never dreamed of having, often at a scale they could only have dreamt about in ways that never seemed real. But they're contributing to the vitality of the local economy, which is going to provide more discretionary income for people to go to the hotel, among other businesses in whatever city they're in. And what Kathleen was referring to, that at CGI, the Clinton Global Initiative, a couple of weeks ago, a large group of companies, NGOs, and other actors came together and made a commitment that each of them in their way would contribute to this purchasing clout through their own supply chains or through their training programs or other significant ways in enabling women to benefit. That is going to amount to, if it succeeds, bringing in $1 billion plus in new revenues, potential income to women-owned businesses. It's phenomenal in terms of what it represents, but I think it's really phenomenal to see this kind of collaborative, which I think is another way the paradigm has shifted, that it's now NGOs working side by side with governments, working side by side with businesses to unleash what is in everybody's interest, and particularly women.
Excuse me, how many big corporations do you think recognize that they have that special responsibility? Well, I want to ask both of you, from your observation.
That sounds very unique what Marriott's doing, but I know a lot of big corporations
do have. Look what Tory's doing. I mean, she's doing it a different way. She's doing it through really addressing access to capital in many ways, and particularly the needs, the knowledge needs, the experiential needs that women have in getting their businesses off. If I can say this, several years ago she and I talked, and she was just creating her foundation, just trying to think through where could she make her most significant contribution. And she focused on her own experience, the kind of business she has, and she really wanted to help other entrepreneurs and focused on the United States in her situation. And look what she's blossomed today, developing a partnership with 10,000 women and so many others. So I think this is the kind of creativity that's going on, and it's really taking off in ways that I think is going to make such a difference economically for everybody.
But one thing I just wanted to add to that, thank you, Mom. But one thing I wanted to add to that is that in the beginning, when we were thinking about the foundation, we wanted to have impact. But then what we've realized is because of the foundation, it's affecting the bottom line. And it's really amazing for our business. It's attracting incredible talent that want to work at our company. Our consumer is loving the fact that we have this. It's not something that I knew going into it, but it's been a win-win.
And that is a point that I think is really worth accentuating. Business doesn't do this for charitable purposes. Business does it rightly because it's good for business. It's about the bottom line, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's why businesses are in business. But we know it has a social value attached to it. So you get a win-win. You get the bottom line win, and you get the win for society and larger wins in this conversation for women.
Another question? Who's out there?
Oh, right here.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Amanda Riggs. I just started an organic skincare company called Verita, where I source from women-owned businesses.
What's the name of it again?
Verita. It means truth in Italian.
Okay.
So I source from women businesses in the Middle East and produce all by women's cooperatives. And I'm now wondering, this question is for Tory, how you grew from a small business to a medium business, because I have two other women businesses in Egypt that want to provide for me, and I'm wondering, how do I grow? How can I incorporate them into my supply chain? So it's more a technical question. Thank you.
Well, it's hard to just narrow it down, but I would say networking is key, and taking advantage of different connections, and and doing that. But social media, I would say, is how we really built our business, because we did not have a budget for advertising. We had to really think creatively. And we launched e-commerce 9 years ago, which was unusual. It was sort of new territory back then to sell online. But then as each new platform became available, we started to really be interested in looking at that platform about how it could help us build our business and how it could help gain brand recognition, whether it was Facebook, Pinterest. There's so many different ones. I personally do Instagram and Twitter, but then our company does Facebook and everything else, Senior Weibo. But it's crucial as you go forward, I would say. I'd say that is a great way that's cost effective to build your business.
Which means you need to bring people on board who
Yeah, I
follow
would say
all that,
definitely
get
people,
it.
but we don't have an enormous team, and I would say it's a younger person because
That's exactly right.
Tory, tell them how many stores you have outside of the United States now.
So we have 103 stores globally and about 43 outside of the
Wow.
States.
It's terrific.
remarkable.
It's fabulous.
Thank you.
It's terrific. Okay, another question. Here's your chance.
One back here.
Hi, my name is Meg Byram. I'm a blogger and a small business entrepreneur. My question is it's for all of you and for all of us here to think about. It's kind of more about the women movement in general. And I saw the Makers movie, that was the 3-hour movie, and on it something Gloria Steinem said really stuck with me, and it was that by defining our movement and using the word women entrepreneurs and women this and women that, we almost separate ourselves even more. And so I'm curious to know your opinion and maybe how should we phrase our movement together so that it's not just women entrepreneurs. We're just entrepreneurs. We're just business people. And so we're not further defined by our sex or our race or whatever it is. And so that's something that I've been really thinking about. And, we define it a lot as women, but because that's what we are and we should stick together. And I'm obviously a big proponent of helping other women, but is that helping us integrate into the male kind of dominated fields?
It's a great question. The Makers, the documentary on PBS, by the way, if I could pat PBS on the back a little bit. So what about that? That's a good question.
It is an excellent question. And when I became ambassador for global women's issues, you could have said the same thing. Why do we need an ambassador for women? And I always said I would root for the day when you wouldn't need an office like that or somebody focused on these issues, because we would be truly integrated. And the mission of the office was really not to create separate programs for women so much as to integrate these issues across the department. Department has a lot of power. Government has a lot of power. They work on all regions of the world. They work on economic issues. They work on human rights issues. The key was to make sure that within the operations of all of those other functions of the State Department, that women's considerations and perspectives would enable more effective outcomes in those programs. Now, we're not there yet. We have particular obstacles. We've got to keep moving this engine down the tracks. But I often have felt, just as your question represented, that as soon as I said women's issues, marginalization popped up, even though we're talking about half the population of the world. So I do think, one, we have to recognize that we can't look at women's issues as solely women's issues. If women succeed, everybody succeeds. If women are prosperous, the world is more prosperous. These issues are about men and women, about boys and girls. But as soon as you say women's issues, they're only about women. So we have to talk about impacts, evidence, high-yield dividends. It's a long road, but ultimately I hope we get where you are, where your question was.
No, and I also obviously agree with Melanne, but it's a fine line and you have to be careful. I remember I was at an event and I was introduced as a female CEO. I got up and started laughing, and I said, I've never heard a male introduced as a male CEO before. And so it really struck a chord. But I think it does, you have to be careful, in my opinion, that it's not just a women's issue, because it's, to me, about the quality of work. It's about ambition. It's about impact. And those are the important conversations. And as Melanne said, if a woman is successful, the family is often successful, the communities are often successful, so it's affecting everyone.
I think we would all agree we'd love to get to the day where we didn't need to have these conversations, where it was just automatic, that it was easy for women to get the funding that they need, to be accepted, to be able to go and do and create and build, as the two of you have done. So with that, I just want to say it's been a privilege for me to be here. Thank you very much. The clock has run out up here. I am told that you all are welcome to stay to continue your conversation. But on behalf of Politico and all the other sponsors, including the Tory Burch Foundation, let's thank our panelists, Tory and Melanne. And thanks to all of you, to the table leaders, to everyone who came. I've been given the assignment of saying thank you to everyone, because there were so many people who came together to make today possible. Thank you for being here. Hang around a little longer if you'd like to. Thanks. That was great. Thank you.